time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Hello and welcome to the Property Podcast. It's episode 33. I'm Rob Bence, and with me every week is Rob Dix. Hi Rob, how are you?
Hola, señor Bence. Hola a todos y bienvenidos a la Property Podcast. With apologies to anyone who actually does speak Spanish. That'll all make sense later. But yeah, I'm really well, thanks Rob. We're talking about how to win with off-plan property this week. And we've also got exciting news about what we've got coming up, an update on Rob Bence's drug habit, and a stalkerish resource of the week, which is my favourite kind, of course.
Please listen to the end so you know I'm not dodgy. Okay. First of all, before we get going into this packed episode, we'd like to give many, many thanks to the people who continue to leave us reviews. If you're on the fence about leaving a review, please do, because we read them all out and we really, really appreciate it. But this week, Rob, we've had some really nice reviews in. And first one up is from Toby. And Toby says, I'm a university student in the second year looking for a career in property. And I thoroughly enjoyed listening to you guys. Hilarious and genius. The show is brilliant and you've got me hooked. Well, thank you, Toby. Next, Guy Routledge, someone we've both met, Rob, says, top drawer content. Many thanks to Rob and Rob for constantly cranking out top quality material that's both educational and entertaining. My partner and I are just beginning our property investment journey, and this podcast has given us lots to think about and helped hugely in setting us off in the right direction. Keep up the good work, guys. Thank you, Guy. And finally, Jason says, excellent. Really good advice and presented well. Genuine people passing on their knowledge to help others. Thanks, guys. I've started investing thanks to you. And I love those types of messages. Well done, Jason. That's brilliant. Okay, Rob. So what have you been up to?
Well, I've been moving to Madrid, as I hinted at with my terrible Spanish earlier. I said last week that I was off for a little while, landed in Madrid this week. Haven't got too much to report on the property front because I've just been kind of settling in here and using something to learn Spanish, which might become a future resource of the week. It seems to be going pretty well. And just kind of generally getting into the swing of things. You've been keeping things busy back at home.
I have. First of all, thank you very much to Mark from Homeshore. We spent over an hour on the phone this week chatting about all things property, and he gave me some real nuggets of information and advice. So I really appreciate it, Mark. If you're listening, thank you. Homeshore are a great company back in Liverpool. They do great stuff there. They do things, as far as we're concerned, the right way when it comes to property. So
now, that is a third mention of Homeshore, so I think we now officially have to give them the podcast, at least co-brand it.
No, they're just top guys. You know, there's some fantastic people in property and there's lots of non-fantastic people in property, and they're on the fantastic side of the scale. So they're just really two genuine guys who are, you know, helpful with their knowledge and their time. You know, they're really good guys. So if you are interested in anything property related in Liverpool, then maybe get in touch with them. And also, Rob, I've got a bit of a revision to make on our tax episode. One of the things I said was that if you're overseas, when you sell your property, you're not liable to capital gains tax. That generally is true, but we don't like generally on the property podcast. So I have to now thank you to Martin, someone I'm working with in Australia. Martin, hi. He pointed out that yes, that may be true. However, there are some exceptions, and the country you go take your money back to may still tax you anyway. So the UK may not tax you, but then the country you're taking it back will. Places like Singapore and the UAE, well, you're fine. You know, the chances are you're not going to have that tax hit. But if you're in Australia, then you might. As we pointed out, we're not tax advisors. Please take professional tax advice. But I just wanted to give you a bit of an update, everyone. And thank you to Martin for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah, good to get that clarification. It's another example, really, of why you should work with an accountant if you're dealing with large amounts of money, because there are so many different variations and laws change all the time in different countries. So it's really important to keep on top of things, and we clearly can't.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Rob, we've been keeping ourselves very busy, haven't we?
We have. So the news this week, rather than a news story, because there hasn't actually been anything that exciting happening. So we are going to do one of our bits of hinting again. We've done this before and we've said that we've got something exciting coming up, but we can't tell you what. I think last time it was worth it, and we've given you a secret episode as well. We've hinted at that. Well, I've heard people have enjoyed that, so that was worth it. We're doing it again, and this time we're once again saying that we've got something very exciting coming up. I think this is more exciting than the lot. I'm really excited about this. We've been spending loads of time together. Before I left, lots of time over Skype, working on something which I think is going to be really, really, really exciting. We're going to be announcing it next week on the podcast, so make sure you listen to that to find out what it is. And we're also going to be announcing it first to our mailing list. So this is a great opportunity, if you haven't already, to join the mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com. I wish I could say more. I just really want to tell everyone what it is.
We're not selling this short. This is the biggest project we've done together. Now, considering we do this podcast together, that says a lot. This is by far the biggest time sink we've put anything into. So we're really excited about this. If you're interested in finding out, of course, listen to next week. But if you want to be first, get on that mailing list if you're not already. It's free to get on. There's no spam. There's no selling. You get the podcast every week and you get updates first and a secret episode. So where's the loss? It's just a win-win. Get on the mailing list if you want to find out first. Listen next week if you want to hear it in more detail. But we are really, really excited about what we're working on at the moment.
We hinted last week. We're hinting more strongly this weekend. I can't wait to do the big reveal next week and you'll find out exactly why we're as excited as we are. It's going to be big, but we should move on. We should move on because we've got a great topic of the week as well. This week, our topic is how to win with off-plan property. This is a topic that Rob B knows a lot better than I do, so he's going to add loads of value to this. To start with, let's talk about what off-plan property actually is. Off-plan property is really simple. All it means is you're buying a property that hasn't been built yet. You're buying it off the plan. It's a property where a developer is building often a housing development or a block of flats, and they're selling it to you before it's actually completed and ready to buy. Now, we're talking about this now because this is a really hot topic leading up to the last property boom. Lots of people made a lot of money and lost a lot of money on off-plan property. And now the property market seems to be taking off again, or at least all the sentiment is a lot more positive. The media has been full of stories about off-plan property again, so we thought this is a really good time to cover this and tell you what it's all about. We're going to talk about the benefits of it and why it's such a hot topic. We're also going to talk about the risks and what you can do to protect yourself if you invest in off-plan property. That is something that we really do need to talk about because, Rob, you know a heck of a lot about this kind of thing and you've personally lost money on this stuff.
Yeah, I have. I've worked with investors on off-plan property, but I've learned from my experiences. I've personally lost money on off-plan property myself in the UK, I might add. I've got to be careful because the company is still around. They used to be just a developer and now they are a property investment company. So I can't name them. They're based in Manchester and I can't say much more than that. But if you do your research, you might find out who it is. But basically, this company put a deal together that was really, really good. It was a sensational deal. The deal itself was in Manchester as well. It looked really strong. The solicitors looked over the contracts. It looked, on paper, tickety-boo. And then it turned out, further down the line, that the company claims they didn't even own the land and they couldn't do anything about it, offered to refund the money back, which I still haven't had, and this is 4 years later. I actually think they realised they'd given too good a deal away and wanted to renege on the deal. And that's what I do believe that actually happened. The reason why I'm telling you this is not to scare you off-plan property, but it's to make you aware that you can lose money. Now, on the flip side, I know some people who've made vast sums of money from off-plan. But if I can lose money on off-plan, and I've worked in property investment for a long time, so can you. The lessons I'm going to give you today are first-hand lessons and experiences I've gathered myself. Hopefully that if you invest in off-plan, you can take advantage of the upsides, but not be exposed to the risks or the downsides.
Okay, well, let's talk about those upsides then. So if there is all this risk, then why is it worth considering? Well, the benefits, as I understand it, Rob, and you might want to jump in on this as well, is that, first of all, there's a potential to get a particularly good deal. You can get something below market value, as people say. The reason for that is that developers, for cash flow reasons, are keen to make some sales. They want to get some money in the bank, so they might offer you an incentive to buy early. Also, you're being rewarded, I suppose, for your risk. So because you're buying something that doesn't exist yet and you're going to have to wait, you'll be getting a discount for that. And developers also want to have a strong start to sales so they can sort of do all their marketing and say how it's almost sold out and this many units have gone and all that kind of thing. There's a potential to get a good deal. There's also the benefit of leverage, because when you're buying off plan, what you typically do is put down a 10% deposit and you pay the rest when it's actually complete, whether that's 6 months down the line or whatever. The reason that gives you leverage is if you put down a 10% deposit and by the time the building's completed, the market has gone up by 5%, then on paper, you've got a 50% return on the money you've put in. That's even more leverage than you normally benefit from just by using mortgage finance, as we've talked about before. So that means that in a rising market, off-plan is pretty great. It means you get to make these big returns before you even had to pick up the keys. In a booming market where things might be sort of getting toppy and about to come down the other side again, it can be risky. So have I understood that correctly?
Yes, absolutely, Rob. You've nailed it. It's really down to two major things for me. The potential to get a good deal and the leverage aspect. The leverage aspect is huge. It shouldn't be underestimated. There can be serious wealth created if you get it right. Some people also buy off plan and then sell on completion as well because they've made a profit. I know a lot of people who've done that. Not my personal preferred strategy, but I know it's worked for some other people. I know other people who've lost doing that as well. So, I'll caveat it with that. Okay, so let's look at the risks. So what could go wrong? Well, the developer could go bust. You've bought into off plan and suddenly the developer disappears. Well, it's going to stay off plan for permanently. It's not going to go anywhere. You might get it rescued. Someone might take over the build, but you might not get the same deal again. You might lose your money. It is a risk. So the developer could go bust. That's probably the biggest one and the biggest fear for most people when it comes to off plan. The market could crash. You could buy a property and it's due to complete a year later, and 6 months later, the market crashes. You still have to buy. So a lot of people during the last boom bought property and then they got to the stage where they're about to complete and the market fell down. So it dropped by 20%, whatever it was. Suddenly the off-plan property was worth less. The price stayed fixed. It was now worth less. So they had to put more money into the deal and some people couldn't. They only had enough just for the basic deposit. So it put them at risk. That could happen as well. And finally, you might not be able to get finance. That could be a risk as well. So the developer going bust, the market could crash, and you may not be able to get finance. The mortgage market might change between now and when you complete. Although that all sounds pretty scary, as I said before, I've learned, and my direct experiences have helped me to minimize the risk when it comes to off-plan property and maximize the gains. So one of the first things you can do to minimize the risks, developer going bust. Well, what can you do? There's a couple of things. First of all, a lot of developers use the NHBC certificates on. You'll see the flags outside a lot of new builds, NHBC. What most people know it for guarantees the build of the property for 10 years after it's complete. That's a great thing to have. Fantastic. But what people don't know is that NHBC guarantee will protect the 10% deposits as well during off plan if it's in place. If your development has NHBC protection, your 10% deposit is protected as effectively insured. And if the developer goes under, then they will pay out. Now, they only pay up to 10%. So if you're asked to put a 20% deposit and the developer goes bust, you'll only get 10%. You only want to leave up to a 10% deposit if you're using the NHBC to minimize your risk. Okay, so that's one way. And that's probably one of the more common ways. Another way is if the developer's prepared to put the deposit in escrow. Now, this is rare because if a developer is willing to put their money in an escrow, they're not getting their hands on it. And most developers give a deal because they want the cash flow, they want the money in now. But it does happen. I've done a deal recently. It's all sold now. It was in Kent. It was a fantastic investment. And the developer was so cash rich that they held the money in escrow. They only wanted the deal to go through in the beginning for marketing purposes. And then once we sold a few for them, we tried to do more on the same terms and they wouldn't allow it because they were selling on site. So we were a bit unhappy that we couldn't get more. However, the investors who bought in that, lucky them. However, they held the money in escrow. That is the most secure way to look after your deposit. So that's how to protect yourself from the developer going bust. The next is the market could crash and you still have to buy. Well, as Rob's already said, you should never buy in a heated market. Now, what's a heated market? I'd say London is on the verge of entering that cycle, that heated market cycle. However, I think there's still room for growth yet. I reported on Property News Radio a few weeks back how when you account for inflation, London property prices in Greater London are still 27% below their peak when you account for inflation. I don't think we're getting towards the beginning of a heated market, but there's still a fair way to run. Outside of London, we're not there yet. It'll come eventually, but we're not there yet. So I would generally say, and you have to, do your own research and follow your own gut instinct, that at the moment off plan is okay. But in a few years' time, you're going to have to stop doing it in London and followed on the rest of the UK. What I'm saying is you buy in a rising market, but don't buy in a heated market where everyone's going crazy. When there's a property program on every night of the week, it's going crazy. And finally, you can't get finance. Well, this is where you work with experts, mortgage brokers. Some brokers will look at the products and they'll say, yes, we can get you a product, or no, we can't. What you want is there's brokers out there that are really good, but there's some that find problems and there's some that find solutions. You want to find the type of broker that's going to look into every nook and cranny to make sure that they can find a product for you. And that's the type of brokers we work with at RMP. We've got a 100% record of getting people financed. So it doesn't mean that you will, especially if you're doing this alone. Make sure you speak to a broker. And if they say no, maybe speak to two more. They may be a good broker, but they may have not spotted something. So try a few before you rule yourself out of the market. That's the risks, but that's how you minimize them as well. So if you do that, then you can look to take advantage of that huge leverage and the below market value aspect, which a lot of people make money from.
That's a hell of an overview. I didn't even realize that a 10% deposit would be protected by the NHBC. One of my fears would have been the developer going bust, but clearly that's not such a problem as long as you've got your wits about you and you go with a scheme that's covered by the NHBC. It seems like the main danger is just kind of piling in an overheating market without thinking. I suppose as well, Rob, the fundamentals are really important as well, because I can imagine in the last boom, there'd be buildings going up all over the place, lots of deals being offered on paper, which made a lot of sense. But then it would turn out to be, 5 miles away from any kind of schools, shops, transport or anything else. And then when things start going down the other side again and the market isn't as exciting, they're going to be the hardest properties to sell, the hardest properties to rent out. I would assume that if you protect yourself against the risks as you've talked about and keep in mind all the fundamentals as we always talk about, then maybe off-plan isn't quite as risky as it's sometimes made out to be.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Rob. Don't ignore all the other things we talk about. Everything else we've said over the last 30-odd episodes stands true. Include all that when you look at off-plan property. You just have to include a little bit more. I hope you've learnt a lot. Off-plan property is a mystery to many people, so I hope that brings clarity to the subject. If you have any questions, of course, jump on the website, go to episode 33 within the show notes, leave a comment, and we're more than happy to answer any questions you've got, or email us, whatever's easiest for you. We're happy to help. Our resource of the week, Rob, I've got an update first of all, the update on Bulletproof Coffee. So if you're a regular listener, you'll know that I've been dabbling in Bulletproof Coffee. Rob may have made it sound a little bit dramatic at the start of the show. Just call it my drug addiction. Coffee, technically, I suppose, is a drug. So Bulletproof Coffee, what's it meant to do? Well, it's meant to give you increased energy and help you lose weight. I was doing it for the energy, because like everyone else, I work long days and the more energy and more focus I can have, the better. Wasn't doing it so much for the weight loss. So what happened? Well, I've lost weight. I've been eating like a pig, but I've managed to lose 1.5 kilograms, which I know is not masses, but considering I've done nothing really to warrant that weight loss other than have Bulletproof Coffee, then yeah, great. Now, I'm not a dietitian. I'm not a fitness expert. I'm not a doctor. Please don't take this as nutritional advice. I'm just telling you what I found. In terms of the energy, Rob, I don't know. Maybe, but doesn't coffee give you an energy boost anyway? I think possibly slight placebo effect. But if I'm tired anyway and I have the Bulletproof Coffee, I don't find it taking me out the tiredness that much any more than a normal coffee would. So I have to say, I do like the taste. I may continue for a while. I probably will, because I just like the coffee itself. But extra focus, probably not. Weight loss, it seems to be that way.
That's really interesting. I would have assumed it was the other way around. I'm always really sort of skeptical of anything where you can, lose weight by just doing one thing, by just drinking one extra thing or whatever, because it's normally more complex than that. So I would assume that you'd get the energy but not the weight loss, but it sounds like the exact opposite. Clearly, I've managed to get a word in this podcast, so your energy levels can't be off the chart. Maybe it is just the placebo effect when it comes to the energy.
Okay, Rob, you give us the resource of the week, because I know we both use this one.
Yep, this one is called Yesware, and this is an integration for Gmail. The great thing about it is that it lets you track who's been opening and clicking on your emails. This is a little bit stalkery, but it's also very useful. So the use case for it was originally for if you were working in a kind of a sales or a business development environment and you're sending out lots of cold emails to people, then you would be able to track how many of those have been opened. So you'll send 100 emails, you won't get many replies, but you can at least see whether they're being opened, and you can test different subject lines to see which is most likely to get opened and whether people are clicking through to whatever you want them to click through to. So most of us aren't working in that kind of thing, sending that many emails in that way, but I still find it really useful to be able to track things. For example, you can track an email that's particularly important that you're sending to a solicitor maybe, just to make sure that they've opened it to see whether they've clicked through. Not necessarily because you're spying on them, but just because you want to make sure that they've got it and it hasn't gone into their spam. Otherwise, you're in this position where you might have sent someone an email a week later, they haven't replied, and you don't know if it's because they're busy or they're not interested or they never saw it in the first place because it got spammed or got buried under a lot of other emails. I find it really useful. I don't track everything, I just track important emails to check whether they've got through. It doesn't work 100% of the time. Depending on the email setup the other person's got, the tracking doesn't always work. So if it says that someone hasn't opened your email, it doesn't necessarily mean they haven't, but I find out that most of the time you see that someone has opened the email, and that just gives me the peace of mind that the message has got through, and I don't have to worry about whether it's kind of disappeared into their spam box or whatever. That's how I use it, Rob. But do you use it in the same way?
I don't know, Rob. After what you said about reportive and how you use that, I reckon you're much more stalkish than you let on. Very similar, Rob, because speaking with investors, speaking with solicitors, or via email, there's lots of important stuff going around, and sometimes you just need to know it's arrived. And Yesware is perfect for me. I used to be on the free version, and that was really good. Now I'm on the very basic paid level, which is just $5 a month, £3 a month. What's that? A coffee. So for me, from a business point of view, it's a must use. You get open read receipts. It's similar to that, except the reporting side of it's very good. And the nice thing, Rob, is every week, because I'm on the paid tier, I get a report through on how many emails I've sent. And it doesn't really give me any actionable knowledge, but it's quite interesting to see if I've sent more or less emails last week, if more or less emails were opened. Nothing I can take action on, but just maybe to keep an eye on my productivity.
Yeah. And, of course, the sneaky bit, which we have to get in there, is that there is that kind of element of it that you can see someone's opened your email and then they reply to you a week later and say, "Oh, sorry, I've only just seen your email." They're lying to you. That's the stalkerish aspect. But I prefer to focus on the peace of mind you get from knowing that your emails have got through.
Let's be honest, Rob, that's what we use it for.
We kept up a good pretense for a few minutes there.
Yeah.
Check it out. It's an add-on for Gmail. We've said before how if you're not using Gmail, you should be, because there are lots of good email things out there, but there are so many great add-ons for Gmail, and that's what really sets it apart, like Boomerang that we've talked about before, and Yesware now, and Reportive, of course. That's another one for your tool belt, and we'll link to their website in the show notes.
Fantastic. Okay, Rob. So next week, we've obviously got our big announcement, but what subject are we covering?
Well, we are going to also be talking about a beginner's guide to investing abroad. Over the coming months, we're going to be lining up some experts in investing in particular countries. So we're going to kick off with the US, and then we might do other kind of popular destinations like Spain and places like that. Next week, we're just going to give a really general overview to investing outside the UK.
Super. Good stuff. Okay. Well, as we said, make sure you jump on the mailing list if you want to be first to hear out the biggest project we've ever done. I'm not selling it short. It's true. It really is that big. We'll let you know first. Otherwise, wait till next week. We will tell you all in detail what's happening. But I hope you've enjoyed this show. I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions, get in touch. Otherwise, have a fantastic week.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.